Every 2 months, the TC39 meets to discuss what changes will be coming to JavaScript. They have a long process where things advance through stages until eventually browsers are expected to implement them. There's a lot of things in flight right now, like a lot of them. We're talking about a handful of these things already, from signals to pipes to pattern matching, but there's more here. There's a lot more here. There's arguably more in-flight stuff than there's ever been. A lot of the things I'm excited about just advanced in the most recent meeting, which happened at the beginning of April. And I want to talk about those as well as the ones that didn't come up, because I just want to show you guys what the future of JS might look like. So let's dive in. As I mentioned before, first we're going to be looking at the things that happened at the 101st TC39 meeting, and then we'll look at the things that didn't come through this meeting because, again, there's some really cool stuff that wasn't mentioned here. The first change, and I still can't believe this wasn't part of JS before, error.isError is finally at stage 1. We will finally have a symbol to detect when an error is actually an error. Instance of error is unreliable because it provides false negatives with cross-realm things, like with an iframe or the VM modules in Node. So having a proper error.isError is actually a nice win, and I'm excited to see that if and when it ships. Signals, as I mentioned before in my previous video, are something a lot of people are hyped about, and they made it all the way to stage 1. So this is no longer just an idea. This is now a real proposal that has a good chance of making its way in the near future. This one's interesting because using hasn't actually shipped yet. While we do have it in TypeScript, we don't in JS yet. In fact, the proposal for it is currently sitting at stage 3. But they're learning a lot with the said proposal because there's a lot of things that have to be gotten right here for this to be a good experience. So they say here, status is stage 3. The goal of using is to have a composable pattern for actually linking things to external resources, be it memory and I/O. This pattern generally includes the allocation of a resource and the ability to explicitly release critical resources. So this example uses ECMAScript generator functions and async generator functions and exposes the pattern through the return method. So this is pretty classic code. So we have const try, or const handles acquire this critical resource. We try something, and then finally we clean it up. We have an object, we use the object in this try loop, and finally we call this thing for blocking. So you have a resource that you want to use in code, and then you want to clean it up when it's done running that code. You have to handle that yourself right now, which is annoying. So it's really cool to see a pattern that just handles this for us. We see here with async generator functions, we acquire stream, we do some stuff, and then we close the stream at the end here. What if all of that could be done in the handler directly? So here, instead of the const definition, it's using handle equals require file handle. This using keyword allows for this to define the different states of things. So now when we call this thing in the block scope declaration, and we use it, and then we leave the scope, whatever cleanup this has bound will be handled, and things are blocked as expected. This is like one of those obvious wins that might feel weird to have this new syntax for us as JS devs, but on the library side, this is magic. This is so powerful for a library author to be able to define cleanup behaviors, and then when you consume the resource, it all gets handled for you. Really cool stuff. They cite all their motivations for it, including different things that exist within ECMAScript, stream readers, node file handlers, and so many other things. They even cite prior art, including C#, if I recall, was in here. Yeah, where C# has similar stuff, Java has similar stuff, and even Python with the with statement has similar stuff. Pretty cool. I'd say Python's with is the thing that makes the most sense as a comparison to me, where you say something is with, and then you have all of these enter and exit functions that you can define. The implementation for actually using this stuff on like the library side is very interesting. We have dispose as well as a separate async dispose, which are symbols that you can bind to a given interface that will allow you to use that interface and have these things run once the interface has been consumed. So if you have a block scope where you're using something and then the scope finishes, whichever of these you've bound will then run afterwards. And we look at an example here, we have suppressed error extends error. As construction, name, error, suppressed, all those things. So you can define a custom dispose or async dispose by just grabbing the prototype and binding the async function there. This code does not look the prettiest, and I'm sure people will invent lots of cool syntax to make it a little less annoying. Here's the alias for it. So if you define a class, you just define a dispose function in it, and now you're done. Isn't that nice? It's actually pretty cool. Yeah, the symbol dispose of the resource within the object. Yeah, pretty easy to set this up. Excited to see more demos using it. I'm hyped to see where this goes. The proposal was not about that, though. The proposal was about the strict enforcement of using, which means that you would allow for certain resources to require you to use using instead of it being an option. Because if I've defined a class that expects this disposing behavior to work a certain way, and somebody calls it with const instead of calling it with using, and now none of the disposal stuff runs, that's a really bad developer experience and possibly a breaking user experience. So the idea of enforcing the use of using on things that have the disposal stuff attached, it's a pretty cool proposal. And it's nice to see it go from stage 0 to 1. So we can actually have using in a way where it doesn't give us more options, instead gives us a clear path to doing this stuff right. Cool. We're only through stage 1 here, and we are not even getting to the fun stuff because a lot of the fun stuff isn't included here. So we'll blast through these, and then we'll take a look at the things that weren't talked about, although set methods, spoiler, very cool stuff. So let's get up all the stage 2 stuff. Yes, there's a stage 2.7 now, which, it means that it's been approved in principle. Tests have been written. The next steps to get community approval that the tests are adequate, at which point it'll be ready for implementation, which is stage 3. So they have these mini stages between 2 and 3 where they're iterating on it and getting it closer and closer. But stage 3 is when they start pushing, hey, browsers, you should go actually start adding this. So the use for sum precise. Summing a list is a very common operation. It's one of the few remaining use cases for array.prototype.reduce. Are we in the post-reduce era? Is that what this is saying? Do y'all still use reduce? Drop a 1 in chat if you still use reduce. Drop a 2 in chat if you can't remember the last time you used a reducer. 1s if you use it still, 2s if you can't remember the last time you did. I'll be honest, the only reason I can say 1 is advent of code. I find myself in the 2 world nowadays. Seeing a lot of sometimes and rarely. That honestly sounds about right to me. Y'all get the idea. I'm surprised they're calling that out in an official proposal. I never would have guessed I would read a TC39 thing that says that summing is one of the few remaining things to use reduce for. Something important to note here is that these proposals are things that get implemented into V8, not with JavaScript. So when one of these functions is provided, the engine can choose to do these things under the hood for you in a different language. So if we have a reduce function, all of that has to exist in the JavaScript VM because every step gets run by the JS VM. But if we have a sum function, that value could be passed down to something faster, and then it will spit up the resulting value instead. Since JS doesn't have to run for every step and every iteration, it only has to run for one function quick to give you the sum. Not using reduce theoretically allows for your runtime and your engine to do summing much, much faster, which is what's interesting here. If this merges is, imagine how fast Jared could make this in Bun. Like if he can do the sum outside of JavaScript in something native like Bun and just update the memory from there, that's way, 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 way faster. So in that sense, not using reduce for a sum actually makes sense. And also the point that floating point numbers aren't great to add together like this. And if you could do that externally and have a more correct answer, that's probably worth it. Like apparently the fact that there are more clever algorithms to add floats together is a fact that few JS programmers are aware of. And even among those who are, would never bother doing it. Has anyone in chat ever written better floating point addition in JavaScript? Make yourself known. You know what? 0 if you've never written your own custom logic for floating point. 1 if you have. Jesus Christ, Bender. Trying to make your way into a video. Okay, I did it once, it was bad. I'm seeing 2 1s so far, but mostly 0s. Because who the hell has written their own custom implementation of adding floats? Like, why would anyone do that? Autumn, if you can't recall, you did not do it. Yeah. If anyone does end up doing that, let me know how it goes, because that's curious to me. But as far as I know, none of us are making game engines. And as such, none of us are doing our own floating point math. We can make it easy to reach for the better option. Yeah, if they have array prototype sum, that sounds great to me. So this is the proposal. We have values. Values.reduce would be 0 for these 2 being added. And math.sumPrecise. Oh, it's a math function. And it's also sumPrecise. Interesting. Instead of specifying any particular algorithm, this proposal requires the maximally correct answer. That is, the answer you'd get if you did arbitrary precision arithmetic, then converted the results back to floats. This can be done without actually needing arbitrary precision arithmetic. One way of doing this is given the Shook 96. Cool. This is magic because if this works and is performant, this will allow for some crazy like 3D game engine type stuff with really precise floating points. And if this can be done quickly, this is very promising. Oh, somebody just made a really good point in chat. Does this mean 0.1 plus 0.2 will actually finally be equal to 0.3? Do we test this polyfill? Is this video going to be hours long? Cool. So sum 0.1, 0.2. I need to pass an array. That would make sense. God damn it. God damn it. So close, but so far. What is it actually? Math is really fucking hard. In JavaScript, I'm embarrassed for you. Anyways, still a cool proposal. Someday, maybe our math will add up how it should have this whole time. Let's take a look at the promise.try. This is actually an exciting one. Common use case that I and many others have is that I have a function f. This function may be async and return a promise, or it may not. I don't wish to have to know. However, I'd like to wrap it in a promise so that if it is async, or if it throws, I can lean on promise semantics and .catch to handle it. The typical easy-to-remember way that this is achieved in JS promises is with promise.resolve.then. This works great. It catches any exceptions thrown, and it promise wraps any thenables or values returned from the function. However, f is needlessly run asynchronously on a future tick. This is a fair point. What if you want to use the promise semantics, but not have to wait for this to end up at the bottom of your event loop and go through it again? Being able to use promise semantics without blocking is an interesting concept, not have to await. Yeah, if they want F to be run on the same tick, since after all, it might be synchronously returning a value, or if I want parallel semantics with an async function up to the first await, then I need to use new promise resolve f. This achieves my goal, but it's not ergonomic enough to write, nor is it easy to remember. I like how personal this one's written. Usually these proposals are more like high level, talking about the state of the world, not focused in being like, this is the exact thing that I am working on and why I care. Wow. P-Try has 44 million weekly downloads and 8.9 billion total downloads. Nice. Good stuff. Crazy to think that's that popular, but I get why. You get the point. There's a lot of potential value in being able to use promise syntax without actually having an async function. So all the stage 3 stuff is based on eval. Eval is cursed and you shouldn't use it. So we're going to skip these parts, especially since these haven't actually had their proposals updated since stage 1. So not necessarily the best thing for me to cover here. And honestly, stage 4, as well as things we're covering after, are the more interesting bits. So we're going to dive straight into that. So set methods and duplicate named capture groups. Set's too much fun, so we're going to do that next. Duplicate named capture groups. Right now, in JS, naming a capture group in a regex needs to be unique. Fun. So this would be an error because you've reused the year group name. But sometimes you want to match a thing that can be written in multiple formats. So it would be nice to be able to use the same group name for that case. So if we have year being used for 2 things here, we should be able to call it year in both places. So this spec is very simple and lets you do that. Cool. Nice. You regex people must be pumped. If you don't already know about the set in JavaScript, it's my favorite underutilized JavaScript thing. Think of it kind of like a map, except you don't have a value. You just have the keys. So it's really quick to check if something is or isn't part of a set. So if you want to see if a username's already done a thing, you can have a set that has all the usernames that have done the thing, and then you quickly check, is this username in the thing? And if it is, cool, you're done. And if not, you can add it. It's a really nice way to quickly check things. And also the ability to compare different sets. So if we have a set of users who have finished signing up and a set of users who are in an org, we can do this to overlap to get those things together, which is a really, really cool and powerful thing, especially if you can optimize this at the lower level in the engine. If you can do that diff in like C++ with the memory access directly, this becomes a really powerful thing. So clearly, as you see here, sets are very useful, especially once you start combining and comparing different sets to see which values are and aren't shared. So let's see what this proposal is adding. Some of these things are really cool. Oh, it is those. The proposal is the intersection, union, difference, and all of these, which I've had to implement in the past and they suck. So having all of these just built into the language and theoretically being way faster as a result is huge, especially superset and subset. That is so dope to have, where you have a bunch of keys and you have another set of keys and you want to make sure that other set is fully within the greater set. This is huge. This lets you do crazy stuff performance-wise too, if that's like a check you're doing a lot. Woo, fun. Yeah. This is a really cool spec. I'm really excited to see what people do with it. I know a lot of library devs like TK Dodo from over on the React Query side has been very excited about this for quite a while now. And I know a lot of libraries have the opportunity to theoretically get much faster if these things are implemented and they're implemented well in the browser and in the engine themselves. So that being at stage 4 is huge because that means like every browser is going to start implementing it. It's even in MDN now. So when you search for sets in MDN, it just shows you all of these methods because they're effectively ready to go, which is huge. I cannot wait for these things to be in every browser. What's the, can I use for this? Okay, set intersection. Damn. As per always, Firefox is holding back the rest of the internet. I know you guys love for me to shill Firefox because you hate Chrome so much, but yeah, Firefox is holding back the web. And once again, Firefox is taking its time implementing these things. There is a way to go set it manually in nightly builds. Cool. Welcome to the world of supporting Firefox. Even Edge has it. Like, are you kidding? Safari's had it since 17.0. Oof. Imagine being behind Safari for new features. Yeah, I can't. We would have set methods now and they'd be used by everybody if it wasn't for Firefox. That's the point I'm trying to make. Cool. So those are all of the things that have been talked about in the last meeting, but there's a bunch that weren't. And I want to talk about those too, because I don't think they're any less likely to come. I just think they're a lot cooler. First I need to talk about is iterators, specifically iterator helpers, which are a collection of new methods of iterator prototypes, on iterator prototypes, that help in general use of iterators. V8's already shipped them, so we can look at the official docs for iterators, which is really cool. But I'm going to start with the proposal, because I think it's important to have the context of why this is all happening. A proposal for several interfaces that will help general usage and consumption of iterators in ECMAScript. Stage 3. So it's time for browsers to start implementing. Motivation. Iterators are a useful way to represent large or possibly infinite enumerable data sets. However, they lack helpers which make them as easy to use as arrays and other finite data structures, which results in certain problems that could be better represented by iterators being expressed in arrays or using libraries to introduce the necessary helpers. How many people have had a map that they wanted to do things with in JavaScript and you just dump the map in an array so you can actually iterate over it the way you expect? Because I know I've done that in more than one advent of code problem and probably more than once in production too. So yeah, very much a thing I'm excited for, to not have to opt out of other iterator types and just dive into arrays because there are better functions. This will allow us to have all the things we expect without leaving our iterator and going into arrays. So when we're dealing with maps and sets and all the other fun data types, you can keep them in that data type. I've had so many times where I had like a map that was part of like state through something like Zustand, and I wanted to select specific values from it, and having to like look for like finding a specific value in a map, not the key. Ugh, hell. And I would just convert to and from arrays everywhere to solve it. Getting out of that seems genuinely magical. So I'm really hyped for this already. Let's take a look at some examples. Here's a generator, which if you're not already familiar with generators, they are functions that are lazily evaluated when you call them effectively. So you can yield and get more and more values. And here we have naturals, which will start with I0, and then while true, it continues to yield I over and over. So we can map this. So naturals, map value, return value times value. This is so cool. Being able to map off of a generator. Magic. This is so cool. I'm actually really hyped for this. They even have things like filter on a generator. Whew. Oh man. And I just learned about the chaining behavior. Oh boy. Thank you, Gabriel, as always. The main thing with iterators is that it'll run everything in one computation. So effectively, the .map, .filter, .reduce, and .find happen if you chain them all together. It will compute them as one big reducer in the engine. Assuming that they implement it correctly in the VM, yes. But man, if they get that and they get that right, this is so cool. Nobody told me .take was happening. This is a new discovery for me. I should have read this before. Oh man, I'm trying to find the right way to explain why this is so cool. Hopefully you can look at this and see why it's cool. But if you can't, which is also totally reasonable, this effectively lets you generate data with a cap that's defined where you're consuming it. So if I have a thing that generates, I don't know, the one that I had a lot at Twitch was we were generating video manifests for picking what episode we would stream next. It would keep going until it ran out of files. We could add a bunch of checks to make sure it didn't run out of files, but we could also just take the right amount. Or another common case is that we're running this across multiple servers and we know we can only process up to 3 videos at a time before we hit CPU limitations. Now we can just take the amount that we actually want to take. This is so cool. This is a really good syntax for a ton of libraries. Like, here's a thing that we could see that would be great for this. What if we wanted to generate test data? We want to generate a specific amount. This looks great. Drop is just as cool, where you can skip values. So this is iterating, and if we do drop 3, then we skip 0 through 2, and then the next value is going to be 3, then 4, then 5. This is so cool. Flat map, again, so cool. God, if you did .take and then .flat map, I think you can chain them, right? For those who aren't watching live, which is going to be most of you knowing how my videos work, we just discovered that most of this is already in the browser, which is huge. So we're going to drop that generator function, and I want to play because I want to specifically try out. I was geeking out over flat map, which is cool because you can map the values to something different when they come through, which is huge because if you want to split this set of data into a different set of chunks, like maybe I want to parse every word instead, it's that easy to just parse every word instead. So cool. What I want to play with is toArray, because I want to use this to generate an array with incrementing numbers. Because as we all know, generating an array with default values in JavaScript is weirdly annoying and also weirdly runtime intensive. So let's do const count array equals naturals dot take 8 dot toArray. Count array. Whew. This changes everything. I see why everyone was so hyped about these. Holy shit. There are so many things this makes way easier. And you can tell from chat freaking out. Yeah. Wow. Fuck. This is good enough. I almost want to make a video dedicated to it. Jesus. You've been using the polyfill for 2 years. I fully understand now. This is one of those things where I'm going to refactor a lot of code. That is just so clean. And the best part, const more array equals naturals dot take 5 dot toArray. And now we get the rest. Wait, it's not the rest again? Is it does it reset what we've taken when we convert that? Does that not count as taking? Yeah, because it's a function. It's not like in a state, so the thing hasn't been consumed. We'd have to take the naturals call. So if I was to do const current state equals naturals, current or const m1 equals current state dot take 5 dot toArray. That will work for m1. And now if I do const m2 equals current state dot take 6 dot toArray, we'll get, I spelled state wrong. If you ignore the fact that I can't spell, that's a little annoying. The fact that once you set a take value on an iterator, you can't take more at that point forward. I get it, but it's annoying. This is how most people are going to consume it anyways, so it's fine. But was expecting a bit more state and flexibility there. I'm curious to see what people do and recommend with this going forward. Of course, we have a for each, which is really handy to get a set of values and then do something for each of them. In this case, we're pushing to log for each value. That's what you would expect. Pretty simple. And then sum. To check if any value in the iterator matches a given predicate, sum can be used. It takes an argument, which returns true or false. Yep, iter.sum, true, iter.sum v, true, false. Iterator's already getting consumed. Interesting. Yeah, so since the sum has resolved to true after we've done naturals.take 4 here with this iterator, once we've done this, we've consumed the iterator, so we can't reuse it for another check. But we can go on to do take 4 on naturals directly, because every time we call the generator function, we're making a new iterator, so that works. That makes sense. There are so many of these that are huge. This one's really handy, especially for a stream where we have data that we don't know when it ends or if it even ends. Having the ability to make sure every single value coming down the stream is correct, huge, golden. And it's just being built in is so nice. And of course, .find. If we want to find the value where a certain thing is true, that is now trivial. Iterator.from object. From is a static method, unlike others listed above, which takes an object as an argument. The method allows wrapping iterator-like objects with an iterator. Cool. So here we have a class iterator that has a next function that returns done false value 1. Now we can wrap it with iterator.from, and it just does what we expect. That's pretty cool too. One more important piece here. All of the iterator producing methods in this proposal are lazy. They will only consume the iterator when they need the next item from it. Especially for iterators that never end, this is key. Without generic support for any form of iterator, different iterators have to be handled differently. Huge. This is the magic here, is you don't actually consume any of the data until you're actually using the value. So if you have massive, maybe even infinite data sets, like, I don't know, the billion row challenge, this is phenomenal for that type of stuff. The amount of time I spent just trying to read the chunks and like iterate through them when I was trying to do the billion row challenge was obnoxious. And here you just don't have to anymore. Huge. So hyped for this. This is one of those like, oh my God, why do we not have this already type things? And I'm really hyped that not only is it coming, it's in the browser. Like, this is so simple and elegant, and these types of problems were so annoying to solve before. It feels like the beauty of pipes and maps that I'm used to from something like Elixir finally making its way into JS land, which is so cool to see. Yeah, it's lazily loaded. Oh, so good. This is so good. I'm so happy about iterators. We can agree, as we see here, a lot of the fancy new iterator functions, specifically iterator filters, the one I checked, works in Chrome, Edge, and Opera, which is all the Chromium-based stuff. So it hasn't made its way to Firefox yet, or Safari. So I can't roast Firefox as hard as I would like to, but yeah, Firefox be Firefox. We'll continue to roast it because of who I am as a person. Iterators are looking really promising. Very excited to see where they go, but they're not the only really cool proposal here. Let's dig into temporal. I think temporal might be the single JavaScript thing that I've been asked about the most that I haven't talked about. The reason for that is I wanted to dive a lot deeper and give meaningful input. I still can because I've read about it so long, and it's now far enough in stage 3 that I'm actually pretty confident it's going to ship. But man, temporal is cool. Remember the days of using many different date time libraries like good old Moment.js? The browser should always have had a better way to deal with date times. The browser is possibly the single platform where date times are the most valuable. Like, how many web pages are there on the internet that don't have a single date time on them? I honestly can't really imagine many as I sit here thinking about it. Like, most websites have some need for date time somewhere. So the fact that browser handles them so poorly is obnoxious, and I'm very excited for it to not handle it so poorly, as we see in this proposal. Date has been a long-standing pain point in ECMAScript. That's putting it lightly. This proposes temporal, a global object that acts as a top-level namespace, like math, that brings a modern datetime API to the ECMAScript language. For a detailed breakdown of motivations, see Fixing JavaScript Date. Did Maggie just write a huge article about this? Yeah. There's a lot to dig into here. Let me know in the comments if I should do a video about the history of datetime in JavaScript, because it's a complex and long story, or a -1 story if you ask JavaScript how long it was. So what's the goal here? This is the proposal for temporal, a global object that acts as a top-level namespace similar to math, and it brings a modern datetime API to the ECMAScript language. The principles are as follows. All temporal objects are immutable. Date values can be represented in local calendar systems, but they should be convertible to and from the proleptic Gregorian calendar. You could have shown me this name and asked if it was made up and it would be a 50-50 shot for me. All time of day values are based on a standard 24-hour clock. Whew, that is very necessary. And leap seconds are not represented. Cool. Fuck leap seconds. Sorry, Google. So let's take a look at the actual uses of this. The documentation as well as the polyfills. If you really want to use this now, you can. I do think a lot of browsers support it already, though. If I go to, can I use... Oh, no browser support it yet. Weird. Temporal.instant is supported in Safari. Okay, we're still very early with temporal still. I thought so, but it's sad to see because I believe this is a pretty far state. Yeah, stage 3. So this should be in browsers by now. But as per always, if you guys don't know, the problem with time and time zones, I've referenced this video more than possibly any other in my history of YouTube. Yeah, date time's hard. And it seems like the browsers are putting off dealing with it because it's hard. So we'll see when they actually get it in. I'll actually read the docs for what this looks like to use, though, because it is really cool. Temporal.now.instant, get the current system exact time. Temporal now time zone ID, get the current system time zone. Zone date time, which is current date and wall clock time in the system. All these .now things make pretty clear sense. You could even get plain time and plain date time all here. It's pretty handy. It works how you would expect. Temporal.instant is interesting. It represents a fixed point in time called the exact time without regard to calendar or location, like July 20th, 1969 at 2017. For a human-readable local calendar date or clock time, use temporal time zone or temporal calendar. Cool. So instant is temporal instant from this exact thing to string, epoch. Cool. So it represents a specific moment. Crazy to think this didn't really exist before, because usually the difference between like duration, time, date, and how they combine has never been particularly clear. So having the ability to have a specific moment and then a duration as separate concepts is huge. Plain year month. Oh, how many times have you needed this where you just want to get the year in the month and none of the other bullshit, or just month and day? And then you have this new date object where you can get date.day of week or year month days in year. So much useful stuff here. Duration. Again, how do we not have this before? Why is it so hard for us to take two date times and figure out how much time occurred between them? I know I've had to deal with that a bunch. I know others have too. And then like adding that duration to something else, mess. And now it's not. Now it's trivial. Temporal duration from, and then you just pass it hours, minutes, whatever key values you want here that are numbers, and it just spits out the number. God, you know that this previously was 69,420 and they changed it. That's all I see when I look at 469,200. This was previously 69,420. So you can find the Git history to prove it. I love that. No commitment. Temporal time zones. Making time zones actually dealable. Finally, temporal calendar represents a calendar system. Most code will use the ISO 8601 calendar, but other calendar systems are available. Cool. Weird. Fine. Temporal.calendar.from ISO 8601. Dates, cal, date from fields. There you go. Date.months and year. Date.days and year. All makes sense. I like they documented this, that exact times are different from calendar dates and wall clock times, and the zone date time and these other pieces are what link these things together. String resistance parsing and formatting. I have needed this diagram for things for so long. I love that they have like documented the standard and what part represents what here. Very, very handy. Good stuff. I finally understand the temporal hype. This is huge. Even just having duration as a primitive is enough a reason to want this desperately. So I'm very excited for the future where all browsers have this stuff built in, because we should have this years ago. But if you can't do something years ago, the best time is now. We're down to the last two. Make sure you stick to the end, because the last one is very fun and spooky. It's the Shadow Realm. But first, we have to do pattern matching. I've already talked about pattern matching, and sadly, since then, it has not advanced past stage 1. I think a big part of why is that it's been handed over to a new crew of people to run it. Kat was running it when she was at Microsoft. I think she's still at Microsoft. I'm not positive about that, though. Yeah, Kat might have left Microsoft. But Daniel Rosenwasser, who is the guy in charge of TypeScript at Microsoft, he's the manager of the team, is one of the top champions, which is very promising. Very promising. Weird to have the TypeScript manager proposing things in JS, but when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. And a bunch of other really talented people as well. So what's the problem? What are we doing here? There are many ways to match values in the language, but there's no ways to match patterns beyond regular expression for strings. However, wanting to take different actions based on patterns in a given value is a very common desire. Do X if the value has a foo property, do Y if it contains 3 or more items, etc. I've already done a whole video about pattern matching, and I highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out. It's a pattern that I desperately love and need in JavaScript, because I hate switch statements, and there isn't really a nice way to do this with switches. We take a look at the syntax, which should be at the bottom somewhere in here. Match. We have this 5 integers array. So it's 5 integers, it's integers 5. So this is 1 through 5. So here we have the match pattern. If we have when let A in the array, this is matching when there's one value in the array. Matching a generator against an array pattern. Obtain the iterator, which is just above the generator, then pull 2 items. One to match the A, second to verify the iterator only has 1 item, which fails. When let A, let B is us having 2 values instead here. So if we only have 2 values and it fails when it pulls the third, this is where we'll end up. But otherwise we hit the default. This is the magic of pattern matching, is you can have different patterns that you're trying to match to. So instead of having to write a bunch of weird if thing is true type cases, you just assign the values. If that is the correct assignment, it just works. It's a really cool pattern. This works for objects as well. Is the code just not loading here, or did they kill the proposal some way where I can't see them anymore? Okay, what the hell? Yeah, this is just in their markup. They just deleted the code from the example. What the fuck? That's annoying. That's one of the specific patterns I wanted to show. One more example, there's tons more in my video that you should check out, is checking for specific things on an object. So here we use math.random to decide if we're returning a number or a string. So get number or string returns math.random if the random value is less than 0.5. So 50% of the time it's the number 1. The other half it's the string 1. And now in the pattern matcher, we can pass this object. And if number or string comes out to a number, then we'll log this and we'll go down that path like a switch. But if it's a string, we go down this one instead. The magic of matching is it only can match one thing. It has to match the top thing of the list. So yeah, hype. Think of this like early escapes, where I'm sure we've all done the pattern. Like if I was to rewrite this, instead of match, what we would probably do is if type of that is number, then we would console log number and then return. Or we do an else, is what we'd probably do. And now you get the idea. We'd be doing this type of stuff where we have a bunch of like these nested if checks, probably full of early returns and stuff. Now we have an actual syntax that describes what we want. We want an object where number or string is number or number of string is string. This might seem like a semantic thing, but once you get to increasingly complex cases, this gets really, really nice. People are mentioning switch true as another option, but like, I'll be honest, as a big JavaScript defender, switch true statements feel like we're admitting that our language sucks. And I hate that. It also, like, those don't work for iterators at all. Where matching works with iterators, matching isn't some weird syntax hack. Matching lets you check for specific things with this new syntax in the shape of the pattern. Huge. Very excited. And now for the final proposal that is currently in the pipeline, Shadow Realm. Shadow Realm's actually pretty far along. It's in stage 2. Has a bunch of legendary people who are advocating for it. But what is it? What are Shadow Realms? Shadow Realms are a distinct global environment with its own global object containing its own intrinsic and built-ins separately from the browser. So standard objects that are not bound to global variables like the initial value of object or prototype. They have a whole explainer doc here too. The Shadow Realm proposal provides a new mechanism to execute JS code within the context of a new global object instead of JS built-ins. API enables control over the execution of different programs within a realm, providing a proper mechanism for virtualization. This is not possible in the web platform today, and the proposed API is aimed to a seamless solution for all JS environments. There are various examples where the Shadow Realm API can be well applied, such as web-based IDEs or any kind of third-party code execution. Like, imagine building Code Sandbox with the ability to actually isolate chunks, or DOM virtualization, like Google AMP, and like making isolated versions of the DOM to grab things in and out. Test frameworks and reporters, like in-browser tests, but also in Node using the VM calls. Testing and mocking in general are huge for this. SSR to avoid collision and data leakage. Again, huge. In-browser code editors and even in-browser transpilation. Oof. So much cool potential use cases for this. Somebody asked if you could hack this with iframes. Kind of, but you have no ability to go in or out of the iframe. It just exists by itself, and you show it or you don't show it. You don't have any way to interface with it. This would give you a way to interface with something as well isolated as an iframe. So cool. Sadly, they requested stage 3 in 2021, and I don't think they got it. Yeah, this is the meeting where they proposed it. Pretty sure they got even more feedback. Oh, that's cute. Nice little ending. But hopeful that we'll see this one go a bit further, because I've seen more and more hype around it recently. People seem to be pushing it now more than ever. Here's what it would look like to consume. We define a new shadow realm, named red in this case. Red add equals await red.import value inside code.js add. See what's going on here? We're loading different JavaScript to live inside of this realm. Realms can import modules that will execute within their own environment. When the module's resolved, it captured the binding value, or it creates a new value that's a wrap function that is connected to the callable binding. So here we're binding add from inside code.js to this red shadow realm. So now when we call red add with 2 and 3, it will give us back 5 because we have bound this function, which is exported from this JS code to here as an isolated box. Let result equals red add. Yep, you get the idea. It's a wrap function exotic object that chains its call to the respective imported binding. The evaluated method can provide quick code evaluation within the constructed shadow realm without requiring any module loading, while it is still required CSP relaxing. This is the client security protocol stuff, just making sure it's secure, which is cool because now we can update things in global this and then have our VM call global this as well, which yes, you can safely call your shadow realm.evaluate, and that's okay because it just lives in its own world. And now we can change global this.some value in both places, and it will not affect the current JS VM that you're running within. That's so cool. This is like proper meaningful isolation to the point where using eval, in quotes obviously, is actually somewhat safe here, where it never was before. This is huge. The wrap functions can also wrap other functions the other way around. So we can set unique values, red.import value, set unique value. That's pretty cool, where this set unique value function lives within the imported code. And now we can call that function from outside, and it will update the stuff on the inside, as well as updating the value that we're using here. That's pretty cool. Yeah, the code in there, set unique values, CB global list of some value times 2. Yeah, so the callback gets called with this, and then it gets multiplied by 2. So we started with the value of 2. We then, I always forget what the double times does. That's exponent, right? So 2 to the power of 3, which is 8. And then we multiply this by 2 again inside of the shadow realm, which makes it 16, which is why we get the 16 here as the result. I think that's pretty cool. The ability to execute code inside and outside, pass strings to this safely. So much cool shit. Also, a lot of potential for people to find and also create really subtle exploits and things when they use this. But I think this is huge. And I think if used right, this would enable applications we can't even think of right now. The safe execution of code that is input from something other than your team and your developers. This is like theoretically like comp time for JS is now a viable path. I am hyped for this. This is really, really cool. This might be my favorite so far. Iterators is really cool. Yeah, this is tough. These are all dope. There's a lot of cool stuff coming to JS. I hope you guys are as hyped as I am because I'm really excited, and not just to make videos about it. That said, let me know what your favorites are in the comments so I can plan accordingly and make videos about the ones that we're most excited about. I know I'm personally really hyped on the iterators and set stuff, but honestly, after seeing Shadow Realm, that's quickly bumping up my list too. So let me know what you like so I can cover it more in the future, and until next time, peace nerds.